We're on Unit 2, Part 5 of the study guide. So we had stopped at Greg. Furman versus Georgia said that the death penalty was cruel and unusual, but they don't say it because of like, oh, the death penalty is terrible. What they're saying is the Supreme Court is that Furman, who got the death penalty for breaking and entering, got the death penalty for the wrong kind of crime. The death penalty should be for murder. So when the Supreme Court heard Furman's case, he's the guy who broke into a house that was occupied. His gun accidentally goes off and it kills the homeowner. And he got charged with murder and breaking and entering. He gets convicted on both, but he is given the death penalty for the breaking and entering. So when the Supreme Court heard the case, they said, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Furman's right. So during these years, and it's just a couple of years, we have a moratorium, a pause on the death penalty. So the death penalty actually does get ruled cruel and unusual punishment. Later, Craig is the guy who goes through North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia on a crime spree. He gets the death penalty too, but when the Supreme Court hears his case a couple years down the line, they're like, no, death penalty is perfectly fine because you got the death penalty for first-degree murder. So when you look at our punishment, it has to fit the crime. And so you can't give the death penalty for shoplifting. You can give the death penalty, though, for first-degree murder. So the punishment has to fit the crime, or else it would be cruel and unusual punishment. This is an old court case from American One, but Dred Scott versus Sanford. Dred Scott is a slave. He was taken to a free area, and he sues for his freedom. And this was set up, by the Abolitionist Party, a group of people who were anti-slavery, and they wanted to see the ending of slavery. When the Supreme Court rules, they rule that because slaves are considered property, they are not allowed to sue their owner because they're not a U.S. citizen. Now, it's a horrible ruling, but the abolitionists now know where the fight. And where the fight is, you got to change the Constitution. Because the Constitution guarantees people their property. It's eminent domain. So that eminent domain, if the government takes your property, they have to compensate you for your property loss. Okay? So the slave cannot sue his master. So that's why they do the 13th Amendment, where they free all slaves, and then they do the 14th, where they give citizenship, okay? Leandro versus State of North Carolina was an education lawsuit, and so Cumberland County, Harnett, Hoke, a bunch of counties that are not very wealthy counties like Wake County and Mecklenburg, they went ahead and they were a part of the lawsuit. What the lawsuit basically says is North Carolina is required to give all children an adequate education. It doesn't mean dollar for dollar. It just says adequate, which means you have to give kids access to education. So if they can't be in a public school building, then they need to have access to a computer they can take online classes. So adequate is just they have access to it. Number 37 is gerrymandering. So what is gerrymandering and why is it illegal? Gerrymandering is when you draw a voter district, to favor one party over another. So if you look at it, here's like different ways to do gerrymandering. And it's really stealing an election. So see this blue party, 60% of this district is registered blue voters. So when they go and they vote, they're probably going to vote along party lines, which means they're voting for the blue party. Same thing with all these other ones. So you're not allowed to do it. So that's why we have to redraw district lines. So North Carolina right now is having to redraw our voter districts because there are some districts that are being accused of gerrymandering, that there is one political party that is being favored over another. It was a way to discriminate voters ages ago. So after the civil rights movement, and you start getting less and less and no restrictions on voting, this was a way to discriminate against voters. So states had drawn up lines based on race, poverty, wealth, political parties, and they were excluding people who they didn't want in power. And so now all districts have to be approved by the federal government. So North Carolina's is under review. Number 38 is why have people called for an end to the Electoral College? Technology. Okay. Yeah, in the old days, you don't have the technology that we have today. But also, there are people who feel like these small states who have 3 electoral college votes, That means they have 2 senators, because everybody has to have 2 senators, and 1 House member, have 3 votes. Compare the North Carolina, which is a heavier populated state, who only has 15. Same thing with California, Texas, and Florida. So some people feel that the Electoral College is more favorable to smaller areas. Like proportionately, they would get more say or more votes in the college. But in order to change it, you have to get an amendment out there. Question 39 is, why was the Department of Homeland Security created and what power allowed it to be created? So this is done after 9/11. So after 9/11, we were surprised, terrorists attacked. It shook the nation, and people wanted to reorganize our defenses. So we created a new department using the elastic or necessary and proper clause to kind of organize all of our defenses. So it kind of reorganized a lot of our security that we had in the country. So taxes. A progressive tax, the more money you make, the more you pay in taxes. So this is your federal income tax. The more money you make, the government gets more money from it because it's a progressive tax. A regressive tax is the less money you make, the more you pay in taxes. So regressive taxes, sorry. So a regressive tax, the less money you make, the more you pay in taxes. So regressive taxes aren't like common, but they do happen. Like good examples would kind of be like a sales tax sometimes can be considered a regressive tax. It doesn't matter who you are, you all pay the same in taxes. Technically, sales taxes are proportional tax, so we all pay the same. It's a flat tax, okay? So what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax on imported goods. So any foreign or imported good is going to get a tax on it. Tariffs can be lowered, they can be raised. It just depends on how the economy is going. And an excise tax is a tax on an exact item, like gas. Okay, so gas has a excise tax on it. Number 41 is, which agency is responsible for collecting income taxes? That's the IRS. So every April 15th, you have to file your income tax return. The agency responsible for helping us during disasters is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And technically, they are under Homeland Security now. So not only do they prepare for like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, mudslides, wildfires, they also prepare for a terrorist attack and what to do in the aftermath. Question 43 is, which agency takes a population count every 10 years? That's the U.S. Census. So every 10 years, we actually do a population count and we figure out who needs to get more House members or less. So we do an apportionment of the House members. So like North Carolina's actually had additional people added, and some states, like these northern states, have actually lost people because they've had a depopulation and we've actually had an increase in our population. 44, which agency investigates white-collar crimes? A white-collar crime is like embezzling, art fraud, things like that. A kidnapping, organized crime, and terrorism, that is the FBI. And which agency helps the elderly with hospital costs? It's going to be Medicare. Okay, so and yeah, you got to do it all online. But Medicare is for our elderly people. We care for our elderly. Okay.